the substitution. That does not say, that doesn't say they're getting. So you're more than welcome to submit it, so you can review it, but right now.
We are contradicting our handbook right here. Is there a lawyer for you guys?
You were happy to submit the communication and they'll review it, but for right now, there's been no determination on it.
Thank you, Randy.
That's muted.
Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Smithville R2 School District Board of Education for August. If you would, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 7.0, adoption and modification of the agenda. 7.1, adoption modification of agenda. Does anybody have any changes or modifications to the agenda that we have presented? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the agenda as presented. Got a motion in a second to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 7.2, approve the executive session meeting minutes for July 21st, 2021. Any corrections or modifications to the executive session minutes need to be made? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the executive session meeting minutes from July 21st, 2021.
Second.
Motion in a second to approve the executive session meeting minutes for July 21st, 2021. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 7.3, approve the regular session meeting minutes for July 21st, 2021. Any changes or corrections need to be made to the regular session meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for July 21st, 2021. We've got a motion in a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for July 21st, 2021. Any further comments? Please vote. Motion passes. 8.0, approval of consent agenda items. We have 8.1 approved bills for payment for August 2021. 8.2 supplemental pay for August 2021. 8.3 board policy 2021A for the second reading. 8.4 board policy 2021B for the second reading. 8.5 policy DLCA-C Smith SMV travel expenses for a first reading. Policy GB1 part-time and substitute employment, long-term substitute teacher rate of pay. 8.7 special education local compliance plan, and 8.8 contractual agreement. Any questions or comments about the items in consent agenda?
All right. 8.5 on the consent agenda items talks about having a 90-day to submit expense reports. As I understand it, from the person is submitting it, that's nice because I can just hold it all at the end. If I'm on the other end, the accountant that's covering that. 90 days is kind of excessive to tie out my books. You can go past quarters, so now you can't tie out quarters. So from the accounting standpoint, that can create some issues. So I guess what I would want to know is the accountant side of things okay with going 90 days? Or is that a burden on them and they'd like to see that back at 30 days? Because
the 90-day was brought to our attention and asked. There's a lot of different times where mileage is expense. And one of those times is when we're sending out administrators to supervise different athletic contests. So during those contests, typically it's a season. So you have your fall season, your winter season, and the spring season. And typically that season lasts 90 days. And so that way they basically take their mileage, they log it, and they turn that in during that time. So the current policy is 30 days. It is pretty rigid. And so there might be a time where someone might forget. And by policy, we shouldn't pay that out. And so we don't want to punish those folks for, I don't want to say volunteering, but they're working, at very low cost to supervise and help support our activities, go to different functions and things like that to where they wouldn't get mileage. And so that 90 days gives a little more time for those folks to turn in that mileage. But it doesn't give, all year long to where somebody could build up all year, turn at the end and us not be prepared for. So it's kind of that in between, goes with the seasons, goes along with that supervision schedule. So that's why the 90 days was suggested.
And I get it for the guy turning it in, but married to an accountant, I also understand the hair that gets pulled out when they can't tie their books out.
It'll
So,
put a,
I don't know, not having talking to our accounting staff, does that create an issue for them? Because if
it'll
it
put a
does,
little more liability on us, but if it helps our staff and makes them, feel like they're going to get reimbursed for the mileage of the money out of their own pocket they're spending, then we want to do that for them. We don't want to make it so long to where it does cause that liability or that issue that you were talking about, like a year or 180 days, but we feel like 90 days is kind of a good sweet spot where people can still turn it in, maybe forget a month at a time, but not go past that 90 for us to reimburse for the mileage.
Robert, I get that. I guess, if I'm wanting to reconcile my gas, I don't want to wait 90 days to do it. So I'm not convinced 90 days is for the mileage piece. What's, with you being at other districts, what was kind of
The
their
30 days is a typical MSBA policy.
30?
That's what you typically see, but I can say this, it's usually not followed, even though it's on the policy. And that'll make it right in other districts, they don't follow it. But typically, if you turn it in within the year, you see other districts reimburse it, even though it says 30 days. And you see that as a practice. And I've talked to other folks in other districts, and yes, theirs is 30 days. Some have changed it, but most are 30 days because that's what MSBA recommended. But I'm like, well, do you cut it off and tell them you're not going to reimburse them? And they're like, no, we just usually go and reimburse them. So in my opinion, if we have a policy, we need to follow it. And so that's why this suggestion was made, is because we follow our policies. And so that way, if it's 90 days, then if it goes past 90 days, then we're not going to pay it per our policy says. So we wanted to kind of give a little more time in there to be able to turn in that mileage, but yet not make it a full year. And to the point that Scott said, make it very difficult on the accounting department to reconcile those things.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion and second to approve the consent agenda items as presented. So moved. Second. Got a motion and a second to approve 8.1 through 8.8 consent agenda items as presented in the packet. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Hi.
9.0 communications, 9.1 board priorities update.
Yeah, a couple of priorities to address. First of all, Mrs. Ambrosen has a memo there. Couple of priorities. Mrs. Ambrosen has a memo there related to preschool to update you on our progress there. And also a little bit later in the agenda, Mr. Kruger is going to update the board on our financial progress as we look to restore our reserve balance. I can answer any questions from my.
And make your questions on the board priority. 9.2 assistant superintendent for academic services.
Thank you. I just have a few items to update the board on. First, our new certified staff reported last week. On Monday and Tuesday of last week, they had cooperative learning training. On Wednesday, they were in the buildings with the rest of their colleagues for professional development. And then we kicked off our new teacher orientation, our new staff orientation, excuse me, last Thursday. They are a great group of new staff members, really excited to have been able to spend last week with them and definitely looking forward to collaborating with them as we move forward. So thank you to those of you also who were able to come today and greet our staff, and convocation was really a very special event today. Lastly, I just wanted to update the board that we will have the graduation survey out by Friday. We will be sending it via SurveyMonkey so we can limit the responses per email, and we will send it to all of the senior students as well as the first 2 parents listed in Power School to get their feedback on the location.
One to all the students, one to all the parents.
We'll defer to Robert on that one.
Yeah, so each email will go out separate and there'll be one survey taken per email. Once the survey is taken under that unique survey for that email, then it won't be able to resubmit it. So that way someone can't load the ballot box or do anything like that. Be a true representation of those that answer that question.
I was wondering how many parents want it versus how many students want it.
We will send them out separately, so we'll know exactly how many parents versus students. Yes. That's all I have unless you have other questions.
Any other questions for Dr. Craddock?
Okay, 9.3 construction update.
Thank you, Danny. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here real quick. And once I do that, I lose view. So let me know once that comes up. Okay. Just let me make sure we're on the first slide here and start over. Okay, construction update for August. Of course, we have our projects that we're working towards. The first one is the Eagle Heights Elementary Classroom Addition. That classroom addition is complete. We are just finishing up some finishing touches, some little things, touching up paint, touching up code base, stuff like that, that may need to be finished. All of our furniture has been delivered except for a couple pieces of table, which is really good news because there's a lot of districts that don't have their furniture right now due to supply chain shortages. So we are very thankful for that. And for the most part, we are ready to go with just a couple of tweaks over at Eagle Heights. So that was a very successful addition. We're very happy with how that's completed. The combination of J.E. Dunn and DLR for our architect did a great job on the project. So be great to see those kids out there, see our preschool in 2 of those classrooms out there this fall. And if you get a chance, go up to that school and see that new addition. So turned out really nice. There's a couple pictures of that Eagle Heights edition that I'm just going through now that you can see. So that's the last one, the new bathroom in that hallway. Our next project is the Smithville Activity Center, which is very apparent in our main campus here. Want to show a couple progress pictures here. Here you can see where the footings are starting to be poured for our main project. So we try to get a good angle for that picture so you could see the activity that's happening. That's exciting. We've had some really good weather days to pour those footings and to get everything going. We've made up some good time. As you know, we had the delay for the AT&T fiber that was through that project and getting AT&T to move that fiber and splice that around the project to maintain our internet access for our campus. So we're making some really good progress. We're trying to tidy up some things on campus before the first day of school. And so you guys probably noticed the drive out there that was replaced that had been beat up from the truck removing all the soil from that area. And so we're really excited how it's progressing and it continues to be on the same timeline. The picture here is the retention basin that we have on the south side of campus to help control some of the water wash off that we get over to our neighbors to the south. This is really going to help keep that to a minimum. We calculated this again for the 2025 projects, which has the parking lot and tennis courts up there. So that way this is to code for that whole area, not just the area of the activity center. So we won't have to disturb the dirt again in 2025 for any type of retainage drainage area that we have. So that's the activity center. It's still, the timeline is still late November to have that building enclosed, and we're still looking at late May of 2022 for that building completion. So we're still on schedule and looking forward to meeting that as we go forward. The next projects that I wanted to mention was the playground resurfacing in the kitchen hood. I don't know if you've had a chance to go to the elementary schools, but those playgrounds look really sharp. And so here's some pictures. This playground is the Eagle Heights playground on the north end. You can see that all the mulch has been removed. We have all the turf down. Everything's been tidied up. The areas you see that are lighter green are high wear areas because those areas are walked on or played on more than other areas. So that way, those don't wear out the turf as much. Those are more high resistance areas than the other spots you see. So that's what those are. So that's the north end of Eagle Heights. That is the south playground at Eagle Heights for our kindergarten and our preschool kids to start. Nice area for them. This is the playground at Horizon. And so that is looking towards the north. And then this is looking back towards the west, where you can see we put in that retaining wall. For those of you who remember, we had a lot of runoff from that dirt on that hill. And so that should help capture that. Sod's going to go in later this week to start. And then that way, hopefully for the first day of school, you won't have that dirt around that area for the kids to get on. There will be grass there. So working hard to get that cleaned up for the first day of school. This is the Maple North Playground, because we have one on each side of Maple as well. And so you can see how that has been developed. And then also that is the playground on the south side of Maple. So really excited how those turned out. They did a great job. The kids are going to be super excited to get on those surfaces for the first day of school. And we're excited to have all kids of all abilities be able to play on those areas, no matter what physical condition or needs they have. So I'm very excited about our playgrounds. And last but not least, you always hear about this kitchen hood. There's a picture of our famous kitchen hood this past fire inspection this week on Tuesday. So Chief Klein came in, tested out all the systems, everything passed. We got that certificate. So we are up to code in the high school for our fire hood. And that puts us up to code at all schools, which we already were compliant with. But high school was our last one because it was built in 1969 and it had the original hood. So I'm glad to see that that's completed a week before school starts. They used it today for convocation. Everything worked great. So we're ready to go with the high school. And that's all I have on construction. There were two more items I did want to share with you. The first one is transportation. I don't know if some of you guys have seen some of the news about transportation and bus drivers. So there's a shortage of bus drivers nationwide. We're down about 5 drivers this year so far. There is a minimal amount of people that are applying, and the ones that do apply, it's not like we can just give them the keys and go. They have to pass background checks, they have to pass their CDL written test, and then they have to pass their driver test, all 3. So during that process, if someone applies and they start that process, they drop off. We lose them. They lose interest because they can go out and frankly get a job that pays just as much and not have to do all that training. So bus drivers are in short supply right now. We're having to really analyze our routes and see what we can do. This year on our online registration, we asked the question, do you need transportation? And so we're using that answer to remove some of the kids from the routes. And so that way we can streamline the routes and get them down to as specific as possible to minimize the routes that we run. So we usually run about 15 and a half routes. We're probably going to be running about 12 and a half this year. And so that's just because we don't have the drivers. We have the buses, we have the mechanics, we have everything ready to go. We don't have the drivers. And so those buses are going to be, running towards the long end of what we like to see a bus route run. But that's what we're going to have to do this year because we just do not have drivers. So I wanted to let you know about that. The next thing I wanted to mention is we're working hard to improve our technology and furniture in the boardroom here. When we run our Zoom meetings, we do it very rudimentary. We don't do it in a way that is where someone can freely talk. They have to mute, unmute, make sure their speakers are back and forth. And so we are going to make sure that our central office is outfitted to be able to stream. So we can do this for board meetings, we can do this for professional development, we can do this for online and distance learning. A lot of different applications we can use for what we do here in the boardroom for that. So with the ESSER money that we've received from the federal government and how they've allocated that, we're able to use that money for improving this area technology-wise to be able to stream those meetings and other type of PD learning sessions that we have. So wanted to give you an update on that as well. We're going to start that process this fall. Of course, with anything else with supply chains for technology and furniture, it is going to take a little bit of time to get those things in for the delays that we're seeing. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Does our, what's our bus service contract again? Who is it?
Coulter Bus Service.
Do they have the capability to subcontract additional bus services to pull in drivers?
So everybody is short drivers. There's other districts offering bonuses just to come back to the job you already have. Just don't leave us and we'll give you a bonus. So it's not the equipment, it's not anything else, but just the people. The people are scarce. It's hard to find people that have a seat the critical equipments that can drive. They are rare.
Thank you, Robert.
Every district is clamoring for them right now. So this isn't a Smithville problem. Honestly, this is a nationwide problem. You're seeing this in every district. Lee Summit, for example, changed their tiers. Instead of a 2-tier system, they went to a 3-tier system. So that way they could reduce the amount of routes they have and run the same buses 3 times instead of running them 2 times. And so that would be tough for us because if we did a 3-tier system, it'd have to be, K6, 7, 8, and then 9, 12. Well, just that 7, 8 doesn't do enough to reduce of what we would need. So we'd have to do something unique like K through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12. And that's going to make different times for something at the same building. That's not something we're prepared to do this year. All cards are on the table for next year, but I don't see the problem going away. So.
I know one of the things we've done in the past is we have an idea of busing for all. We bus kids within walking distance to schools. That might be something we have to start looking at is some of those shorter distances are now have to, we're not going to provide that service. If you don't have the drivers, somehow we're going to come up with something creative. So maybe that's something we're going to have to look at in the future.
Yeah, we have to look at all options right now because it is a very serious issue. For safety reasons. Walkers that go to Eagle Heights, most of those live in Wildflower. They'd have to cross Eagle Parkway or F. Here on the main campus, we don't really have a good sidewalk structure system yet put in place. There's plans, but it's not completed yet. And so to walk on main campus isn't the safest. The safest building to probably walk to is Maple because they do have a neighborhood surrounding it. So we will have to look at that option. You're absolutely right. In the past, we've yielded those options just because of the safety of the unique area of our main campus in Eagle and not being super conducive to walk to those areas.
Any further questions for Mr. Hedgecorth on the construction update? Okay, 9.4. Comments from the audience. Before we have our comments from the audience, I want to say thank you to those that came tonight. And also thank you for masking up. If you do have a mask on, we are asking that you wear it correctly, or you will be asked to leave the meeting. Just so if you want to be here and want to participate in this part. The public comment, we've got 7 people signed up for public comment. We do have 20 minutes allocated for public comment by normal board policy. If we want all 7 to speak, we would limit those to 3 minutes apiece. I will read the normal blurb. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to make comments to the board. A total of 20 minutes will be allocated for public comment. Speakers will be heard in the order in which they notified the superintendent's office of their desire to speak. If the 20 minutes expires prior to all speakers being heard, any speakers not heard may submit their comments in writing to the district office at 655 South Commercial, Smithville, Missouri, or email boe@smithville.k12.mo.us. Individuals addressing the board should state their name, address, and limit their comments to no more than 5 minutes. Items or issues related to specific personnel should not be discussed in open session. So with 7 people being signed up, does anyone object to the 3-minute limit on per speaker so that everyone gets an opportunity to speak? I'm asking the board, I'm asking the speakers if they're willing to make everybody available to speak and they can limit their comments to 3 minutes.
Can you possibly maybe do it for me? That way, if we don't need it, we'll get it back. I mean, no one's, we got this stuff that written down.
Well, I understand that, but we start going up into the 30-minute range and then we're just ignoring. We adjusted policy last week at the special meeting up to an hour and allowed for the 14 people to speak. So
It's such a hot button issue. I just feel it's kind of important because we kind of voted on both sides. I mean, just, it gives the parents a chance to vet. It gives you guys an opportunity to hear, and what I mean, and you could just meet in the middle or instead of you. We greatly appreciate you meeting.
If we do forward, then we're gonna have to limit it to 5 speakers, and still stay within the policy.
So we won't budge over 20 minutes.
It's okay.
Trying to.
I'd rather all 7 for less money.
What was the concession? An extra minute per speaker, which adds an extra 7 minutes? And 30 seconds. I have no problem allowing 27 minutes.
Well, again, if you're going to recommend that, then make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we have 27 minutes for the audience.
So we'll have 7 speakers at 4 minutes apiece. Is that what you're recommending? Motion? Motion and a second. All those in favor, just do a roll call vote. Karen, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. 7 speakers, 4 minutes apiece. So we will have a timer. First up is Whitney Carlisle.
Am I muted? Am I good? Okay. My name is Whitney Carlisle. Did I say my address again? You read that, okay. My name is Whitney Carlisle. I live at 14601 Mount Olivet. I am disappointed in the vote this week, not only with the outcome, but the way the process was done. I do not understand why there was even public comment. Clearly, many minds were already made up as shown the fully prepared, typed up speeches and presentations given to us. As a parent and member of this community, I should not feel like my voice is falling on deaf ears. I will call out hypocrisy every time I see it. Ever heard the saying, have enemies? Good, it means you stood up for something in your life. I stand by calling out the board president during the previous meeting for voting to mandate masks and himself cut his off. I stand by minutes after voting to enforce masks on our kids last meeting, we firmly stating to two of you who had your masks down, to put them up. It does not matter to me if you were eating a cookie on the stage. The audacity to stand there minutes after voting, shoulder to shoulder, with your mask down next to each other, did not go unnoticed. You know who doesn't get to pull their mask down and eat anytime they want? Our kids. They have to sit spaced out on marked blocks in the cafeteria to do so. I will call out the actions of many speakers who, while in favor of masks, made sure to pull theirs down, probably because they wanted to be heard and seen. You know who doesn't get to pull their mask down when they give a speech? Our kids. Kids and teachers, I learned, who also want to be heard and seen. Over the next month, should masks be required, I want you, every time you go into your office to pull your mask down, to think of the little third grader who doesn't get to do that. If you voted.
You, we unmute them. Unmute that line. I apologize.
Oh, you're good. Is that my turn?
You're good. Michelle, would you mind unmuting your? That should be it, but I'm guessing that.
If you voted for a mask mandate, you better be willing to walk the walk and wear that mask every day, all day. During this meeting, the topic of how to spend the COVID money will be discussed. I read every survey response. Many of them had to do with hiring more counselors, assisting with mental health issues, or finding ways to make up for all the academic failings that occurred last year. Well, maybe if you would have listened to the parents who, for the majority, wanted their kids in school full time, we wouldn't be having to do damage control now. You didn't listen to parents then, please don't make that same mistake again. It's not too late to take a stand for parents' rights. It's my understanding that it takes one of you to make a motion and another to second this motion for a vote to be called. If I have that correct, before you vote for the safe return to in-person learning plan, please consider speaking up and standing up to allow parents the right to choose for themselves to mask or not. I thank you who stood up for parents. I am pleading to let me as a parent do what is best for my child, a plea I cannot believe I have to fight for. By giving the parents the choice, you are allowing each family to make that important decision. When in a position to show with your actions that you stand for freedom and parents, many of you chose otherwise. When you were called upon to step up, did you? You might say you support the Constitution, our freedoms, and our rights as parents, but it is another thing to defend them. Thank you.
Next, we have Brooke Perkins.
Okay. I'm with Whitney. I do feel a little deceived and manipulated and overall disregarded at that last meeting. I feel it was all for show. I know the news was there.
Some of us were on the news, but it really was just there to show that
mainstream media wants us to do. So don't get after them at all. Didn't seem to matter at all in the end. And like she said, minds were made up before the meeting started, before you heard the public comments. You, Jeff, you had your own prepared speech, and I do appreciate preparedness, but this was not a meeting to be prepared for until you heard everything.
Yeah.
You mentioned all that you received tons of emails from your parent committee members on both sides of that. I have no doubt. What I do have doubt is that you read them all, with the exception of a few people. Because if you did read them all, you would see that there is not definitive evidence for either side to support masking being appropriate and working effectively, or the other side, masking is not working. You just can't prove that based on the emails and the information and being in healthcare and not being. Just because I'm not in healthcare doesn't mean I can't be informed on whatever it is that I choose to direct my efforts towards. Susan, you mentioned everything you read supported masking and prevented the spread of COVID. I guess you missed my email, because what I sent proves that masking does not support COVID spreading. Stop. There are several that show that. You can see them in the CDC everywhere. The graphs show that masks have no effect on the spread of COVID, increasing or decreasing. They just does whatever it's going to do. What evidence has been shown to prove that masking works? Because all I can see is that it's expert opinions on both sides. And it's just whatever expert you choose to believe that moment is the one that you're going to push on us. I'm sick of everybody pushing their opinions on me. That is opinion. All of this is expert opinion. You cannot tell me that it is fact because it is opinion. Science is not all facts. It's ever changing, just like COVID. I've seen tactics such as bullying, shame, and threats masked on us and our children, and it's just terrible. Would you wear a mask if it meant you could see your friend again? That's just terrible to say that to your student, your child. That's the choice of that person's parent or that person's family to not go to school or to mask up. It's not the choice of your child whether or not they get to see their friend. So don't put that on our children. When does it end? What is irresponsible is telling people they don't have the ability to be informed enough to make personal health decisions, that your expert opinion is the right expert opinion and should go unchallenged and never questioned. The government henceforth should decide what's best for the health of you and your family, and they're already trying to control how we can provide for our family. When does it end? That's very reassuring since the government has never made a mistake.
Next up is Aaron.
My name is Aaron. Elliott Court, Smithville, Missouri. First one on the article on page of the Wall Street Journal, the case against masking children. That was written by Marty and Kevin
Chief of Surgery at Johns Hopkins Medicine, as well as H. Cody Meisner, Chief of Division of Pediatrics Disease and Professor of Pediatrics at Tufts University School of Medicine. Some of the physical issues, some more important than others, but those who have myopia can have difficult seeing due to the fogging of the glasses. It sounds minimal, but when you have to take your glasses off constantly all day and you're in third grade trying to learn how to read or write or whatever is going on that day, that can be very difficult. Masks can cause severe acne and other skin problems. By increasing airways resistance during exhalation, masks can lead to increased levels of carbon dioxide in the blood. 4, masks are vectors for pathogens if they become moist or on for too long. 5, some children compensate by breathing through their mouths. Chronic and prolonged mouth breathing can alter facial development. It's well documented that children who mouth breathe can develop a mouth deformity and elongated face. These are their points, not mine. I'm just making sure you understand that. The possible psychological harm of widespread masking is an even greater worry. Facial expressions are integral parts to the human connection, particularly for young children who are only learning how to signal fear, confusion, and happiness. Covering a child's face and mutes these non-verbal forms of communication can result in a lot of emotional interactions. Anxiety and depression. Seeing people speak is a building block of development. It is especially important for children with disabilities such as hearing impairment. The CDC reported for the week of July 31st, the rate of hospitalization for COVID children 5 to 17-year-olds was 0.5 per 100,000. The CDC also acknowledged, though, that not all of those children, if any, were in the hospital for COVID. Viral testing and admission is routine, even for patients who with non-COVID symptoms. They get a positive test with a PCR that's set at 40 threshold. That's why it's important to give multiple tests if you're going to do them, but over testing is a huge problem. Now to some data from other countries who are a little bit ahead of us on that spread of the virus as the Delta comes from other countries, as Alpha from other countries. Progress is here. The United Kingdom does not mask their elementary students throughout this pandemic as they feel they're no risk and masking them would be inhumane. Sweden has not masked their students, elementary or other grades, or quarantined throughout the entire pandemic. In March, Ireland's Department of Health announced that it won't require a mask in schools because they exacerbate anxiety or breathing difficulties for some students. There's been 0 deaths in Clay County throughout the last 17 months for school-age children for COVID. You can't say the same about school-age children with deaths for multiple other reasons, from drug overdoses to suicides.
New England Journal of Medicine, I sent you guys links to these emails if you want to pull those up. The New England Journal of Medicine published a research letter on January 6, 2021. 6 physicians, I believe it was, followed every child that was admitted to the ICU, and this is the data they had. This is from March 1st through June 30th of 2020. There's 1,951,905 school-age children in Sweden. From March through June 2020, a total of 15 children were admitted to the ICU upon admission tested positive for COVID-19 or MSIC. That is 0.77 per 100,000 in this age group, 4 of whom were too young for school, so they fall out of our conversation. That leaves 11, which were school-age. 4 of these 11 had chronic conditions. 2 had cancer, 1 had chronic kidney disease, and 1 had hematologic disease. There were 0 deaths. 0. For 2 million school children, 2 million school-age children. Despite Sweden having kept schools open with no mask and no quarantine, we found a low incidence of severe COVID-19 among school children and children of preschool age. In July school board meeting, Jeff, I apologize if I don't pronounce this correctly, Blomberg stated, I quote, "We still believe it should be up to the parents that they make their own decision," end quote. Ian Saxton stated at this meeting, quote, "Gives respect to the parents to make decisions on behalf of their own associated risk to their individual families, which I believe is their given right," end quote.
And instead, now you agreed with the format.
Yeah. Where are we at right now? Okay. And as I just want to say, when it comes to the board of masking and quarantining policy, I believe C.S. Lewis said it best. One of the most cowardly things ordinary people can do is to shut their eyes to facts. Remember that.
Next speaker is Casey Parr. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name.
Hello, I'm Casey Parr, 1107 Coneflower Street, Smithville. Tense, isn't it, guys? Woo. So I don't have anything prepared. Just I appreciate the time to talk to you guys. I mean, this, what else are we supposed to do as parents, but we provided this time to speak with you all. So thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate what we're running in a minute. I actually want to talk about something else first because I do have an extra minute. So I was with my daughter tonight. I'm on her behalf again to give you guys an idea of what's kind of going on out there. I just want to touch base on construction real quick. She's a sophomore. Again, I'm speaking of my daughter's behalf. So she's a sophomore. She's excited about getting to drive again. But she's very disappointed and sad that sophomore parking lots taken up. So she's had a couple ideas to throw out there for anyone who is involved in this process. Perhaps contacting like a local church across the street. If we could maybe use their parking lot during school hours during the week for sophomore parking, or perhaps having the construction workers park over there, students will park in the parking lot. So anyway, due to this idea, students are talking about the things going on in the school district other than masking. But I do want to talk about that because we were talking over dinner at Chili's, and she goes, "You know, Dad, this really sucks. This is another reason why going to school is going to suck again this year. Our kids have gone through so much these last 2 or 3 years. We all have. We all know this, right? So we can talk about lots of different things. But one thing I do want to address in our remaining time, I did hear from one of the school board members that they needed to wait till local data supported giving the rights back to the parents to choose for our children. One of the parents always have a chance to speak on behalf of what is right for our children. But let's talk about the local data. I mean, this is current. We were at Chili's in Zona Rosa, Clay County, no mask mandate, right? Smithville in Clay County, there is no mask mandate. We can all go to Price Chopper, Tom Freaks, Quick Trip, without a mask. But our kids are going to come to school with one on. Vice versa. This is just common sense, guys. I'm just talking. Our kids are going to go to school where masks are mandated and required all day long. As soon as they leave, they're going to go to Price Chopper, they're going to Quick Trip, they're going anywhere in town. This is not required right now, guys. It's not. I get it, that's local data. Also, again, I don't want to take away from anybody's death because I know I work in a hospital. I'm a healthcare provider. One of my coworkers lost their father-in-law 2 days ago to COVID. I'm not blind. In fact, this is hard. People are dying, right? But there's There's facts. And you can actually state that. I mean, Clay County to date has had no school age deaths. So currently, if you live in the state or in Clay County, there's 0% of school age kids who died of this. Okay, you extrapolate that data, children have a very, very, very low chance of dying. So that's local data. That's also global data. So, I'm passionate about this. I appreciate every one of you guys. I mean, I'm like being moved to want to run for school board because what else are we supposed to do? Right? So we all have an opinion, just as you all have. And I respect that. But let's follow the system. I mean, that's why we're here. This is the only chance we get a chance to publicly get our voices to be heard as parents. So I'm going to close with this because I really appreciated this comment from one of the, I'm not going to point anybody out. We talked about that. But one of the comments, real quickly, if our own medical experts can't agree on what's right or what's wrong, who are we to say what you're supposed to do with your child? We are freedom of choice. Parents, thank you for your time.
Next, we have Cindy Baldwin.
Oh my. Let me bring this down to size. Okay. I just want to respectfully ask you all that you consider that our children are operating and overwhelmed all the time right now. And I'm concerned about the long-term impact of the reduced oxygen to their developing minds while wearing a mask. I'm also concerned about the carbon dioxide to the developing minds. And I know we have no data on that because we have never been in this situation before. So I ask that you not operate in fear, and with an illness that the recovery rate is really like 97, 98%, that you at the very least really consider the data that you have right here, and at the very least, I implore you to please opt out the elementary kids at the minimum. All the elementary kids for wearing face masks. You need to do it. And the other schools, middle school, or the senior high, because of the cases that you had. You know, I respect that, but I ask that you please try to do that for our elementary kids because they are operating in a world. And there's not much that we can do as parents. It's just a very trying time for all of us. So that's my special request, and thank you for your time.
Next up is Chris Palmer.
Chris Palmer, 4325 Golden Road here in Smithville. So a year ago, I came here and stared you guys in the face when we were talking about softball. You might remember, you might not. And don't so many faces here, but who was there that night? They looked at me and said, "We care about the kids. We want to do right by the kids." BS. And I'm trying to be calm, I'm trying to be relaxed, but we're a year later, we're dealing with the same crap. And we have more information about this, and we're still dealing with the same crap. So I want to point something out. I sat there for this time, and I watched each one of you. I didn't get the chance to watch the sides. 107 times you guys touch your mask while you're sitting there. You guys are adults. And you expect our kids to sit there and get 8 hours a day in school and not play with their masks? You know how unsanitary that is? And then you're going to touch papers and touch each other? We're actually going to spread this crap more by this policy. I don't know why you guys don't understand this. This is not difficult. There's a very easy solution here. It's called options. If those who want to go to school and wear a mask, fine. I support them 100%. But my daughter who doesn't want to go to school, she's pissed off anymore. She's a senior. You guys pretty much destroyed her freaking high school. She's pissed. And when she found out last week that we're going to do a mask again, she was done with this. So I can tell you exactly what I told her. And if you understand me, you understand this is coming directly from me. Before, I sat there and I said, look, do what's right. We'll get through this, do what's right. I'm not telling her that anymore. I'm telling her I'm going to go meet her down to school, buy Subway, eat outside, and give her the highest prize when she gets kicked out of this damn school. I'm also going to tell my 6-year-olds, or excuse me, my 6th graders the same thing. Not disrespecting your teachers, but you know how many times a day she gets told to lift her mask up? And I watch each one of you guys have to lift your mask up. And you guys seriously, we're adults and we can't do this right, and you expect these little kids to do it? Come on, people. This is ridiculous. So this gentleman hit it right on the nose. People said elections are local. It's time elections are local. And if you guys can't hear our voices, it's time to kick these people out. It's time to get each one of these kids. I never thought I ever went to a school board. But you better watch this tape. You're going to know me real well. Because I will run and I will take some of these seats. I will promise you, and I will spend as much as it takes for me to do it. Because I'm tired of you guys basically sitting here on your thrones and expecting all these kids to live by this, whatever you want to call it, and it's crap. And you guys know this as well as I. There's no information out there to support this. By the way, my daughter works at Price Chopper. She'll leave here and go to Price Chopper work 6 hours without a mask. Clay County's not mandating it. So I would love just one of you guys to tell me why. Tell me how why she can go to Price Chopper and work. Speak up. One of you guys tell me why my daughter can go work at Price Chopper. Interact with hundreds of people a day without having to wear a mask. And Clay County is not enforcing it. But she comes to school here and she got to throw a face diaper on. Please tell me one of you guys have the goddamn to tell me why that's okay. I mean, it's just stupid. These kids are not stupid. They see this stuff. They understand what's going on. They're the most educated and well-rounded and in tune with the world generation we have, and we're destroying them. They see this stuff. We go to Arrowhead with the concert just last week. 70,000 people in Arrowhead sitting there singing together without a mask, but they got to go sit in a class of 20 with a mask on? That makes no sense. And that's in the county, the Kansas City, Missouri County, that are basically fascists. And we're going to sit there and tell them that they go to the cheese game and watch 70,000 people at cheese game, sitting there drinking their beers and high-fiving after Mahomes touchdown, but they're going to can't go here and basically walk in without a mask on? Are you guys crazy? It's ridiculous. And I don't know if you guys actually see the common sense is dead in front of me. It's dead. So it's really easy to explain or to take care of this. Option. We will opt to pick students who want to wear a mask. Please do. If you don't want to, then great. But everything else, guys, it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. And you can't sit here a year later after you told me that day, we care about the kids, we want to do right by the kids, and you guys sit here basically putting the same mandate a year later. And by the way, 100% right. I said I was on Dr. Blatt's parent board, whatever, and she sat there and she gave us the data of kids failing school and kids didn't want to go to school and all that. And it's atrocious. And each one of you guys, I got you. You gotcha. Thank you.
That speaker is Lori Chapman.
Well, I can say as well, a lot of parents who really care about their kids and love their kids very much. I didn't come here with any prepared speech. I didn't come here to say anything profound. And nor am I a professional speaker by any means. I'm a grandma, expecting number 12 and 13 this year. We moved to Smithville a couple years ago, and I love the city. It's great. And I'm grateful for your service. Of course, I would like to see, on behalf of our children, a mask mandate overturned. I wasn't going to speak today until out in the hall, an 11-year-old child with a mask exclusion from her doctor for a legitimate medical condition was denied. She was going to be denied access only if she wore her mask. That she has an exclusion from. She was told that until our Smithville attorney reviews this mask exclusion, she is required to wear a mask. I saw her with tears in her eyes. She spoke last week to you. She's an empowering young woman with a bright future, and she's got a great mama and daddy. So what about those visitors or guests that may also have a mask exclusion? Somebody like me with a medical condition, that if I speak or if I have a mask on too long, you will find me on the ground passed out. What about those people? Are they not going to be invited to these meetings? I also have, I don't want to paint myself as pathetic because I'm not. I'm a vivacious person, but I also have a significant hearing impairment. And even though some of you were probably speaking loud beforehand, I couldn't understand what you're saying because I rely heavily on lip reading. I engage heavily in eye contact. Even though I have a significant hearing impairment, I think I'm a pretty good listener because I listen so intently. But I couldn't hear what you were saying because you're hiding behind these masks. I also had taught voice and diction years ago, and speech and communication, eye contact, facial expression, pronunciation, and articulation. It's all very important in the development of children, young children, learning these magnificent communication skills. If you can't see them, you can't have those expressions and all. It's holding them back. Also, I'm in that category. I'm a little bit older. With a few minor medical conditions, I'm at high risk. My husband and I have had COVID. We tried some alternative things that by some people they might have questioned that, but those were got into our bodies early. We recovered beautifully, and I have those antibodies. So for me, I don't feel it's necessary to just, I'm in charge of my own health, not you or anybody else. I'm in charge of my own health. So please think about our kids, think about your vote, maybe look at it a little bit differently, go back and revisit that. Also, maybe we can look more into health, building our immunity, and the quarantine guidelines. Maybe we need to look at those a little bit more. Anyway, I am one that truly believes that parents know best about their kids. So don't keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you all. That's the end of our public speaking portion of our meeting. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like. We're going to go through the rest of the business part of the meeting. 10.1 General Financial Review FY21 Preliminary ASBR.
Yeah, Mr. Kruger is here this evening. He's going to run through some information for you in that regard. Mr. Kruger?
Thank you. I've turned on my presentation. Hopefully I'm getting picked up for those folks that are listening virtual. But as Dr. Schutz indicated, each year all school districts in the state of Missouri are required to report a June 30th financial snapshot. It's called the annual Secretary to the Board report. It's just that. It's a snapshot of the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. And you report all your revenue and all your expenditures to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. You report your bank balances and all your funds, and basically it's a financial measurement on how the district performed in that prior year. Again, that was due on August 15th. Before I get too far into this, I do want to publicly recognize Karen Kopp. Karen, as you know, took over as board secretary and assumed the responsibilities of reporting this data for the very first time, and has just done an amazing job learning this so quickly and being able to get this submitted. So thank you, Karen, for getting that done. But the highlights of this, if you'll allow me real quickly to go over, is that from a financial perspective, FY21, which was last year, which ended on June 30th, fiscally was a good year for the Smithville School District. It was not a great year, it was a good year. And primarily, the reason that it was a good year from a financial perspective is all associated with relief funds that were funneled down from the federal government to the state level and to the local level, then ultimately to the local school level, to help prop up and provide relief as a result of the impact of COVID and its impact financially on the global economy. For example, just last year, we estimated that we would spend just a little over $36.2 million to operate the Smithville School District. That's what we estimated. When the June 30th ASBR reported, we actually spent $35,985,000. So we missed it just by a little bit, but again, we're running about a $36 million budget in all funds for the Smithville School District. That includes everything from paying debt and obligation to paying for construction, to paying for personnel, which is 75% of the annual budget, benefits, buying supplies, and keeping the lights turned on. So that $36 million is the annual school budget. From a revenue standpoint, last year, we estimated that we would receive about $48.9 million in revenue, and we actually received $49.5 million in revenue. So we actually received about $580,000 more in revenue than we were projecting. In large part, kind of on the if you don't look real deep, it was mostly all associated with, again, those recovery funds and the state of the economy. The state of Missouri, for example, received a lot of federal dollars that then they distributed in the form of emergency relief, CARES. They propped up and provided extra additional transportation funds. They provided additional assistance, for example, for like the federal meal program and reimbursement for the milk program and different things like that. Again, all got funneled back, and all, again, primarily as a result of federal assistance that's been provided, again, at all those different levels. When we started last year, we had a reserve ratio in our unrestricted funds of 15.49%. So what does that mean? That means on June 30th, the prior year, you had a little over $4.2 million in the bank of unrestricted funds on June 30th. This year, on June 30th, you had about $5.3 million of unrestricted funds. So your fund balances went up almost a little over $1 million in 1 year. And what did that do to your reserve ratio? Well, again, it's a calculation of what you have in the bank versus what you expended. But it lifted your reserve balance ratio up to 18.78. 18.78. So you went from 1549 to 1878. Board policy says it will run a reserve ratio between 21 and 26. So we're not there. We're not within the parameters of the policy, but we made some significant gains. And again, it's just a 1-year snapshot, but it's very, very good news. And again, I believe that we're on the right track. Later in the program tonight on the agenda, we're going to talk about the third installment, major installment of relief dollars For Smithville, it's actually a little about 606,000. There was a survey sent out to folks. It was referenced, but we're going to talk about how we're anticipating allocating those funds. Again, those funds, as we'll state earlier, are based on our poverty rate in Smithville, which is very, very low. So Smithville, for example, again, got about we're going to get 606,000. But comparatively, there are districts that much smaller than us that got, $6 million, for example. So it's all related to the poverty rate. It's much different based on, again, on that. So with that said, I will answer any questions. I will say that for the month of July in your packet, it's indicated, we've had about $1.3 million of revenue for the month of July. We've expended about 1.7 for the month of July. And again, that's in all funds. So with construction going on and so on and so forth, that's a little bit misleading as we speak. So I also provided in your packet, in case you wanted any additional information, I broke out the actual ASBR information on actual expenditures versus budget expenditures. So you could kind of see where we actually fell versus what we were projecting. I said a minute ago that the revenue thing, was kind of seemed really good, that it was very positive. But I will tell you, if you look a little deeper into the weeds, one thing that was not positive is we missed on delinquent taxes, for example. We said that we would get X amount of dollars of delinquent taxes. Well, unfortunately, we received more in delinquent taxes, and that's not good. I'll just be upfront that that's not a bright spot. We got more revenue, but it's because taxes weren't paid on time, and the reason they weren't paid on time is because, quite frankly, folks were struggling. So we got to be mindful of that too.
Anybody have any other
questions for Mr. Kruger?
So the additional spike though, from the relief dollars, that's not sustainable. It's only a 1 or 2 year with the projected FY23 coming, right?
When it's all said and done between really over 3 fiscal years, we received some in FY20, about FY20.
We received $580,000 in FY21, which is last year, and then FY22, which is this year, we're going to receive about $606,000 of direct relief. Now, what that does not account for is those payments that we were already expecting, and there's no withholding from deductions. For example, like last year, the governor withheld funds on our state aid. Well, not only did that withholding not happen, they actually pump a little extra money in there. One of the classroom trust fund is a special account to get funds per child based on the classroom trust. That money comes from gaming. Well, for a while, gaming was shut down in the state of Missouri. And they anticipated that as a result, gaming would be shut down in the state of Missouri, and that classroom trust payments were actually lowered for school districts. But actually, the reverse happened, and more people ended up gaming, and revenues were higher in gaming than they have been in years. So, that was again another boost, and that wasn't direct funding, but it's there.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the question I'm getting at is expect from our snapshot of the budget review from the end of June through now. Of course, we have that additional money we weren't expecting, so it changes that snapshot balance reserve. But can we consider it an outlier? And then if you do take that as an outlier, how are we actually trending for expected spend versus revenues coming in?
Well, for the coming year, when we initially proposed our budget, we were projecting a deficit of close to additional staff, additional medical benefits,
increase in the base, those things, we were projecting about over 500,000.
Built in, and we'll get to that plan in just a little bit. And we'll be in the black again this year.
And I think the reason I bring it up is because I bring it to the board's attention to be mindful that on paper, we're showing black, and the reality is we're hitting black because of the substantial aids that are coming in. But when you remove those outliers after FY '23, the reality is we're still working off a deficit. No?
Absolutely. You absolutely are correct. And if I can explain that,
Absolutely. Now, one thing again, further down in the agenda, we will talk about the preliminary assessed valuation. There was a little over 13% increase in assessed valuation in the school district. As a result, the overall voting Hancock amendment, the consumer price index, and et cetera, the overall tax rate in Smithville school district will go down at least a quarter. Right, on the recommend at least a quarter, and close to a quarter for next year. So we don't. And there is tax there that but we will get
some additional revenue off of property values, in Smithville. Clay County and Platte County is the same boat.
Are we at a point to discuss commercial development any further to see what that impact and when that might hit?
No.
Okay.
No, we're not.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
I think it's important to reiterate what was just said. The fact that if it wasn't for this extra money from the state, we would still be operating in a budget deficit.
That is correct.
I know we've been jumping up and down and screaming and shouting hurrah for an 18% reserve or increase there, but in reality, we're still operating in a deficit, and we need to understand that and still stay vigilant to make sure that we're on your side.
Absolutely, and that's why we watch this so very closely and are very diligent in what we do. One of the we're not. That's not how we work. And we can do anything. The Smithville School District financially is blessed that they can do anything they want. Anything they want. They just can't do everything they want. And we just got to keep them. We can't do everything. We can do anything.
I had one other question that the numbers weren't adding up, so help clarify. We had 49.5 million in revenue.
Yep.
And we spent 35.98 in expenses.
Yep.
So that's what, a difference of 14 million?
Well,
yeah, but what's not factored into that is the construction dollars. I think is there was $14.1 million also of additional restricted funds in that calculation that you're reporting.
Okay, and I think it's important because most people who are listening to us on Zoom aren't seeing all those numbers.
Yeah.
And I think there is, if you're just listening to that, I think you would miss that 14 million.
Well, and for example,
not misleading.
I think there's $5.3 million in the bank.
Well, that's true.
But really, you have 23,888,057.44 in the bank. Well, almost 24 million in the bank on June 30. All but 5.3 of that is restricted for debt obligations from previous issues and projects, and it's restricted for construction. So it's not, yeah, it's in the bank, but it's not accessible. You can only use it for debt.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Kruger. Okay, moving on, 10.2, athletics, activities, banquets.
It's been this board's history that you bring in those teams that finish in the top 4 in the state at the end of their season so that you can congratulate them. We hear from the coaches about their season. And so that's been your practice. And the question in the past has been, what about individual performances, such as in track, when an individual may finish in the top 4, but the team does not. Wrestling, those kinds of things. And so this board, as you recall, has had that discussion in the recent past. And so what you suggested is attending the banquets. And I thought in August, it would be a good time before the start of the school year to revisit that and to kind of iron out what exactly are your intentions as you approach recognition for teams. And this is, we have the other program, we recognize activities and academics. So anyway, I wanted to give you this opportunity to clarify these are our intentions, and this is kind of how we'd like to approach that. So I turn it over to you. How would you like to approach recognition? I'm sorry. We have. After your last discussion, we discussed, I discussed with Mr. Schaefer the opportunity to have board members attend the banquets, and we can certainly arrange for that. What we would do is Kim Nitchie in his office would notify us of the dates and times for each sport. And, I don't know if you want to trigger, they finished in the top 4, or individuals finished in the top 4, or will always attend their banquets. I just didn't know for sure how you wanted to approach that, but she can keep us posted on the days and times of the individual banquets.
What are the coaches' thoughts?
What are the coaches' thoughts?
Yeah,
At this point, I don't know for sure.
I just maybe ask Darren to get some feedback, and I don't want to intrude on that time to honor their kiddos if they don't think that's what they want. And we can just keep doing it.
And we certainly have time to do that, which is kind of why I'm bringing it up tonight, to give us plenty of time to sort through it. So it's just August. I can get some more feedback on that if you would like.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. I will do that.
Any other questions or comments regarding that topic? Okay, moving on to new business, 11.1, fall 2022, fall 2021, safe return to in-person learning and continuity of services plan.
Yeah, we don't have a formal presentation prepared for you this evening. You have the document in front of you, and we can go through some of the intricacies, or we can allow your questions to guide the discussion. So I prefer the latter. Let us know what areas of the document you would like to focus on, and what questions and you would like answered, and what concerns you have.
I just want to say thank you for the graphic on quarantine. I don't know if we can pull it up, but it's very straightforward and shows exactly why I think that we're going to see a much better school year this year than what we could previously, based on some of the quarantine guidelines from this. So thank you for the graphic that explains it very clearly.
And I appreciate your suggestion to put something together like that.
One thing that I just want to say is you did put in here the school board will be given a monthly update and provide an opportunity to give input. I know there's been some questions going out by people on when would we explore changes in the mask mandate.
Let me turn mine on.
Got it.
No. Sorry, I know in this thing here, it says the school board will be given monthly updates during open session and will be provided the opportunity to give input. So I just wanted to say that because I know parents, there's some parents that had questioned when we would explore again to look at masks. So you're saying monthly that we would be given updates and the board would explore things and could possibly make changes if needed. Is that what that means?
Well, yeah, thank you for that question. And that's A lot of this document is patterned after how we approached it last school year, and that statement is there because of that. So that's the intention. Short answer to your question, yeah.
So my question, and I agree that the graphic displays it nicely, but in terms of accountability, who would be in the classroom or from the office purview acknowledging if they were wearing face covering correctly or not?
Well, again, we would fall back on, much like last year, our teachers and our principals manage that situation and work with students and families in that regard.
I'd like to see us readdress the mask mandate. Whether we say the course that we're on now or not, at least allow these people to understand that we are going to readdress it and talk about it. We may not change anything, but I feel like we haven't addressed it enough. I'm not seeing the statistics. I'm not seeing anything that tells me what we should do.
Do we need to add this as an agenda item, Mr. President, make a motion? Second, under new business?
Can we do that?
Don't believe so. I think we approved the agenda as it was presented earlier, and that we have already approved the agenda. So if we go back then and.
That is our whole, these in bigger buildings. So it's got to be a little bigger.
Yeah, I don't, if you have the ability to call a motion forward at any time, I don't know. I'll keep asking. I have a couple more questions to that effect.
If I might, I mean, we are discussing the safe return to in-person learning plan, which does address this, right? So I do think it is a germane topic to what's been posted and has been publicly acknowledged, so.
So we have fully vaccinated, properly wearing face coverings, no quarantine, no quarantine. Fully vaccinated, not wearing face coverings, no quarantine, no quarantine. That currently, we don't have any stipulation for if you do that vaccination, you're not mandated to wear a mask. So we're not quarantining you regardless. And from my standpoint, it operationally was my concern. It's not safety, it's operationally. We're sending 30, 40 kids home at a time that impacts the operating environment of an education space. It's nothing to do with safety from my purview. What kind of concessions for those opportunities? And then what are some of the additional things we're doing in the eating environment and the additional extracurricular environments where the people are congregating in close proximity without face coverings?
Yeah, great questions, and I'm going to let Denise address.
Okay, so I want to make sure I got all your questions. I'm going to start with the lunchroom. You asked about eating areas. So we will work on social distancing. You know, we have those layers of mitigation, and masking is only one. Social distancing, spreading out to the extent as possible, but also then seating charts in those areas. It would be impossible to remove students from not eating in that area. So they're cohorting, especially in those elementary areas, and then again at the high school level. Typically, students choose who they eat with. That's their group that they typically sit with. And so if something would happen, the student would be exposed without a mask, then they would be expected to quarantine. But hopefully that would be a minor number versus a major number. We want to get away from quarantining large groups. And so if we know who they're near, that would take care of that. Same thing with outdoors, you know, masking is not required outdoors. Kids need to be able to play at recess and do activities without masking. So in that case, it would just be contact tracing at that area and grouping kids. We're trying to get away from cohorting and making kids play in small pods, but again, if they could, we're leaving that up to the building levels to watch, you know, organizing, you know, so they know whose children are around at that point. Did I answer all of your questions, or was there another one?
No, you did. I was, as you're speaking, I'm thinking. Would there ever be concessions to where if one individual was masked and the other one wasn't, we would still allow the individual with the mask not to quarantine? And what is some of the risk liability associated to that?
I can't answer the risk. I know that the guidance that has been provided, I actually asked the county that question. And the current guidance from the county, CDC, the whole group, Children's Mercy, has been both parties should be masked. One, it's not an exception with one being masked only. So following that guideline, that's what we established.
Okay, thank you.
I look at the slide that you put out, and it makes things real clear. But I struggle with the false sense of protection or false sense of security that it portrays. And the news today said that even the CDC is recommending the booster start as early as first part of September. Reading further in that same thing, they're talking that the vaccine's only got a effective date for about 6 months. So if we're talking about fully vaccinated and we're going to put them in a different category, I think that's giving our staff, our community, our kids a false sense of security in this. I don't know. I just feel like if we're going to stipulate the difference between vaccinated and non-vaccinated, and our goal is to stop the spread of this virus, I don't think you can make that distinction. I realize the CDC does. I realize where this stuff comes from, but I have a hard time getting behind something that I really think gives a false sense of security.
Are you saying that if someone is vaccinated and wearing a mask, they should still have to quarantine if they were exposed to someone? Is that what you're saying? Because the vaccination shouldn't be a part of the equation? I just want you to understand.
Let me be perfectly clear. I don't know the best course of action. I don't know what we need to do and what is the best. What I am saying is to say that if you're vaccinated, you get a green light for everything, gives a false sense of security in that vaccine, especially when the CDC is coming out saying it's only good for about 6 months. Here comes the booster guys. I have a hard time saying you get the vaccine. I got it in April of last year, then I am good forever.
So the second bar graphic that says fully vaccinated, not wearing. And speaking to that, there's no additional protection but the vaccine, but yet we're still saying they don't have to quarantine.
Well, I think it's the CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics and so on and so forth. They have made a position for trying to keep kids in school. And the mental aspect, the academic aspect. And so we know that last year, the quarantine policies that were pushed and recommended and advised were very restrictive. And Scott, you said that yourself, and I agree with that. Kids were out of school. I mean, some kids were quarantined as many as 3 times last year. And so that's a huge concern. And I think what the CDC is advising is with what you know, with what they're suggesting is with what they know is that we can reduce that quarantine safely if someone is vaccinated, is what they're telling us. That's the guidance that is coming down. So it's a significant reduction in what's necessary for quarantines, which I appreciate in that particular guidance. I'm not, as I said last week, an epidemiologist. I'm not an infectious disease doctor. I'm a superintendent of schools, and you know this guidance provides us with more flexibility to keep our kids in school.
I understand and appreciate that position, and I don't know what else to say other than if you follow a logical bouncing ball and use the Dr. Breeze thing, not for you. There's just there's just a huge gap in the logic of CPC.
We can apply a more restrictive policy if you'd like and increase the, I mean, with that logic, we could increase the quarantine time.
Don't hear what I'm not saying. I don't have the answer. I'm just looking at this going, there's a gap here too. And I don't have the answer. I can't sit here and say that this is better than this because I don't have that answer. I'm just saying this has got some huge loopholes in it. I don't know.
How are we gonna get a first grader to follow all this? How are we gonna get first graders to maintain social distancing? I've taught for 39 years. There's no way.
Well, then how did they do it last year?
And then they got in trouble by their teachers.
I'm just putting myself in that position and thinking, oh my gosh, the teachers are gonna go nuts.
Yeah. I can tell you the teachers would much rather have them masked if that means these kids are in school. We can't ignore the fact that the teachers want the kids in school. It's a lot easier to teach the kids if they're in school. And you can't ignore the fact that many people out there are saying, many really smart, educated people are saying that masks are what we need, or our best option to keep these kids in school. I can't argue that. This is our conversation, friends. You can stay as long as you listen, but if you're not going to listen finally, then you're gonna have to leave so we can conduct our meeting.
This is bullshit.
Thank you.
Get the information from whoever you're talking to about the smart people. The CDC keeps changing it every damn month.
Let him go.
CDC keeps changing every month.
With all due respect, I do think that's a difficult statement to make. There are plenty of educated people out there that are coming. There are many.
We've got to get the school started next week. You can nitpick, you can find some guy in the UK or in China or in Australia who says masks don't work. You know, if right now we need to err on the side of caution to get these kids in school. That's all we need right now. If they don't want to be in school, if they don't want to wear a mask, then they can go through the homeschool program. You know, right now we need to get the kids in school and the teachers want them in school.
Well, my feeling is it's with Sarah, but it's if we want our kids in school, well, we have to have our kids in school. If both people are vaccinated, both people are wearing masks, there's no quarantines. So why would we not wear masks? Granted, do they work or they don't? I don't know. But if both kids are wearing masks, then we do not have to quarantine anyone and everybody gets to go to school. So that's where I'm coming from.
Any further comments or questions about the return to in-person learning plan? There is no motion yet. That is correct. As a part of this plan. Our action item is the in-person learning and the continuity of services plan as presented in the packet. So are we making a totally separate motion versus the action item.
So if I might, Scott, I think what you're suggesting is you want to amend this policy to change the mask policy to, and I'll let you fill in the blank.
I think it'd be difficult to do it. We need to look at the masking itself, then look at this as a separate issue. I think it'd be difficult to just amend what's been presented here. I don't think it works nicely.
Well, I can
And
say
this is the action on the floor.
masking itself was on the agenda at last week's meeting. It is not on this agenda because of the decision last week. So in that instance, I would say no, that we would need to, that if we were going to do that, we should have adjusted the agenda prior in the meeting to add that as an agenda item. That's just my thoughts on the way the agenda is stated and presented.
And I'd respectfully argue that this is on the agenda, it is, the masking is part of this document and therefore germane, and so the motion could be to amend.
That would be true, but it would be amending the plan here. So to take it and separate it out is what I was saying would not be permissible. This plan could be amended as you stated, but to just take it and separate it out and put it as a separate item, I would believe would be allowed at this point.
Okay, so the motion would be to amend this, we'd vote yea or nay, and then we would vote to adopt this yea or nay, correct?
I believe that's correct.
I would.
Karen, do you have that? So we've got a motion. Did you second after he made the motion? Lynn, I know you seconded earlier, but that was prior to his. So we've got a motion and a second to amend the return to in-person learning and continuity of services plan to remove the mask mandate that went into effect last week. Any further discussion on that part of this item?
Yes, I have some clarification. Mrs. Harwood, if masks were optional or no longer mandated, this plan, how much alteration would be necessary in the plan? It's just minor tweaks here and there, general direction, or do we need to rework this whole thing? Knowing that we came into this meeting with the board's action from last week and structured the plan with that in mind. So if that changes, do we need to rework this whole plan and bring the board back to re-adopt this plan?
I think it would depend on how much liberty the board gave us to do. Because I don't know that it's going to take some work, but I don't want to do it on the fly. I mean, I think there's too much time and effort and work that goes into this, making sure that we have everything planned out. I mean, this wasn't just thrown together. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this document. If we take that mitigation measure out, then other mitigation measures will have to go into place. We have to provide some sorts of layers, and if we choose not to, if the board chooses to not have any layers of protection for our students, then what's going to happen is students will have to quarantine because we have to quarantine. So if students are exposed, they will quarantine, and we just need to make sure we have those quarantine guidelines outlined very clearly.
Denise, can you explain the operational impact and what that looks like?
As far as for staff,
Masks were gone and no other mitigating factors were established due to the
contact tracing, that will happen. So with masking and no little quarantining occurring, it would cut contact tracing significantly. If we have no mask, it would be contact tracing. We just have to make sure we put feeding charts in. So if somebody were exposed and somebody got sick, we would know how to contact trace because we're required to do that. We're required to make sure we know who kids are around and what they're doing. And so it would take work on behalf of the teachers and the school nurses who do that in those buildings to contact trace and notify the health department.
And then the impact to the work modalities in which teachers would have to work. Would they have to then provide documentation to all the kids in a high that have been quarantined at home? And how do you educate those children and those type of things?
Well, we'll be doing that the same way. It would be like if a student were sick, they'll have work to do at home and they'll be doing that independently versus doing it with teacher direct instruction.
So we wouldn't add any additional teacher instruction on top of that?
It would be, I mean, not necessarily, I'm not sure, I can't, Dr. Pransel may want to jump in here, you know, there may be some high school teachers that, I don't know what that's gonna look like, or if they could remote in. I will tell you the biggest thing will be, in any quarantine, regardless of whatever, the loss is always for the student. You know, it's never the same doing makeup work, whether your child's been sick or out for any reason, than it is when they're in desks at school. They lose out on that instruction, which is a loss for our kids no matter what.
So, I mean, you have helped me in a way, because I feel like if we're not going to add additional work for our educators in terms of making them teach online and making them teach for our quarantine kids, they'll be treated as sick individuals who are at home, and then that's the family's decision on how to handle that. But the reality is if both kids are not in a mask and just one kid is, the one kid with just a mask who felt like they were protecting themselves will still be quarantined. That's the reality. So operationally impacting that student's education, not just for the one not wearing a mask, but for the one who only has a mask on, is a true reality. And that's the operational impact that I'm talking about. It ain't that I'm worried Landon's going to get sick tomorrow. It's the operational impact that this decision will have on a kid who felt safe to wear a mask and felt like it was vital for him. Doesn't matter. He's still going to get to go home for whatever quarantine days. And change it is a great idea. Then you have risk liability assessment that you have to consider, because we're going against people from the state body who you can argue they're experts or not, but they're arguing experts saying this is the best way to move forward. That's the position that we have to look at both sides. Hold on, I know where you're at, trust me. I spent time talking with you, I hear you.
My feeling is then you're going to have athletes that are going to be out. People are so worried, you know, about that. And furthermore, why did we have last week then, guys? If why did we spend all those hours last Thursday if we're going to do it again today? I thought that was for us to make that decision.
Well, right now I'm having a conversation. So, yeah.
The only other thing, if I may add, that might be something for the board to consider, and I'm not swaying you either way, is we have people that were excited that there was masking, people that weren't excited. And I think staff members too, making decisions going into the year, if somebody's fearful, somebody's fragilely, immune compromised, whatever, we're gonna have to think about those things too as we move forward. So it's just another point of view. I'm not swaying you either way. It's just something that when we're considering all things, we have to consider all things. Unfortunately, when we look at 3,000 people, there's a lot of different viewpoints that we're looking at.
Thank you, Denise, for all the work.
Any further questions or comments? I will reiterate the motion on the floor, and the second is to amend the 2021 Safe Return to In-Person Learning and Continuity of Services Plan to remove the mask mandate that was put in place last week. So with that understanding, if you want to amend the plan to remove the mask mandate, you would vote yes. If you vote no, it would be to not agree to amend the plan, and then we will go back and take a motion in a second to approve the plan as presented. Is that clear? Okay. Karen, are you ready? So Scott made the motion and Lynn seconded it. Okay. So the motion is to amend. Please vote. Motion fails 3-4. So at that point, I will accept a motion and a second to approve the 2021 Safe Return to In-Person Learning and Continuity of Services Plan as presented in our packet. Got a motion and a second to approve the Safe Return to In-Person Learning as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-1. 11.2, District Comprehensive Assessment Plan 2021-2022.
I think I gotta fill.
On an annual basis, we are required to present our assessment plan to the board for their review and approval. There is nothing about this plan that has changed except for some dates. It's very consistent.
We're talking about other stuff besides math now. Well, there's more to school district besides math. A lot of-
Can we have a 5 minute?
I second the motion.
Again, on an annual basis, we are required to present our assessment plan for the year to the board for their review and approval. There is nothing about this plan that has significantly changed other than a few dates. It is consistent with what we have done for the last several years.
Comments for how to fill the streets.
Thank you for doing it. I know it was something we have to do, but it was very helpful for me to read it and to look at all the testing we do and just to make myself more knowledgeable. So I appreciate that.
It did take me a while to figure out what ASON and all the different, but yeah, I enjoyed going through this document. Thought it was very helpful, particularly as a new board member, to dig in and understand all the different programs. So thank you for the work.
You're welcome. And there's a lot of information on that page. So if you ever have any questions about anything, please let me know. I'm more than happy to chat it out.
Comments or questions? Hearing none, accept the motion and second.
So moved.
Motion passes. 11.3 American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Funds, ESSER 3.
On July 20th of this past summer, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education released guidance and allocations for the third round of relief funds. And again, as previously stated, the Smithville School District will receive a little over $606,961 for our allocation based on our title population in the Smithville School District. Part of the requirements were that we were to get a committee together and or feedback on how these funds could be best allocated. We elected again, knowing that there was an August 23rd deadline, so Monday, these plans have to be submitted to DESE. We felt that the best and quickest way to get feedback was to actually send a survey out. We sent a survey out to all the students, and parents, and staff from the Smithville School District, and we received 117 responses between July 30th and August 11th. That was the window for the survey to be done. Of the results, again, we believe that we put a plan together that we've submitted or ready to submit that will address all of those highly identified areas from the results of the survey and based on feedback with staff. Again, probably the one of the requirements, overlying requirement is, again, these funds address the impact of COVID and learning loss as a result of COVID over the past 2 school years. And we're working towards that goal. We've taken the 606,000 and kind of broken it into 3 buckets, so to speak. And within those buckets, we're still working on potentially identifying the exact line items for each of those buckets. But the 3 buckets that we believe appropriate based on the survey and feedback from folks is, 1, to address virtual learning capabilities within the Smithville School District. That virtual learning is again available for students and staff and so on and so forth. But again, it was an identified need that we are lacking in the ability to do virtual and distant learning. Secondly, is to address and work more on one-on-one individualized student contact and reduced class size, so students can receive one-on-one instruction and not have such large caseloads. And then the third is to address tutoring and learning loss, to provide compensation for folks to provide tutoring and one-on-one working with kids, and software and technology to assist again with kids to meet their needs and catch them up, to fill those gaps, to get them up to speed. Roughly in the buckets, again, we've got roughly $60,000 allocated for virtual learning. We've got about $425,000 for class size reduction and salaries. And we've got about 121,000 and some change for tutoring and software. So that's kind of how we've developed the plan based on the feedback. Another area that was highly identified in the survey, and it was actually referenced tonight, was the area of mental health and counseling. Again, we elected not to put directly any of these funds directly into that because of, again, the $560,000 that we're receiving from the Children's First Fund. And we didn't want to duplicate those efforts. So we'll use those funds for those services. Just like one of the areas was to provide meal assistance, was one of the 14 identifiable areas. Again, we elected not to put money into meal assistance because the Feed Northland Kids group is providing meal assistance. And again, we wanted to duplicate that. We wanted to try to use as many resources as we could. Another identifiable area, and it was actually mentioned some on the survey results, was dealing with indoor air quality and improving indoor air quality. Well, again, that is part of the comprehensive master site plan, is to work on indoor air quality. Again, a duplication of services. So we're going to use those funds for that, trying to use these funds for things that we don't already have funds set aside for. So that's how we work through the plan. Again, I'll answer any questions that you have. But per the guidance, we actually have until December of 2024 to spend these funds down. Again, in the Smithville School District right now, the plan is to spend all of those funds in the current this year budget cycle by June 30th, if we can. Again, put it to work right away.
Is the indoor air quality piece, is that part of the cubic feet air handlers push through and volumes and the filtration?
Yeah, and that's part of like the upgrades that Mr. Hedgecourt's working on like at the middle school and at Horizon.
So are we able to augment some of the construction costs with potential?
I'll have to look at more detail what Esther lays out to see what we can use for new construction versus renovating existing.
We're not using any of the ERSA money. We're using our construction money, our GEO money for those things.
Correct, but didn't you ask if we could do reimbursement?
Because I mean, you said that's a stipulation, right? Part of that.
It's an allowable cost.
So what I guess I'm getting at, do we have an opportunity to augment construction costs, reallocate that to different construction needs and use ERSA money?
We do. We could. There are some districts, for example, in all projects with ERSA money. And I know a district that's getting 70% on indoor air improvements.
Right.
However, you get one pot of money, and if you take 75% and put it towards indoor air, you don't pay for the other identified things that were high in the survey, such as
Understood.
and the
Don't
software
throw it all in one basket.
technology.
Yeah.
So we put those a higher priority.
I think there is a unique opportunity there to leverage, depending on what your needs are, because we might have needs elsewhere that might not be air quality, right? But I think there's a unique opportunity to figure out, because if we can augment some of that money and move construction dollars down the road to further support other construction initiatives, that's a win-win. The other question I have is, we have, so as bad as COVID has been, I say that lightly, some of the unique opportunities that have come from it, and I'm seeing it a lot in my environment, work environment now, is the opportunity for remote working and what we call hybrid working. Our organization, where Susan and I work in certain aspects, have that flexibility now. And that's a pretty hot and heavy trend, and I don't see it going anywhere. And I think it has thrusted us into a new environment of kind of education. And are there opportunities to align our student curriculum to help support the workforce reality, which is you're going to have opportunities where you're going to be working from home, and you're going to have to know how to effectively use Teams, Google Docs, and things like that. Are there opportunities there from a cost allocation standpoint where we could work on programmatic development to help grow some of those initiatives for support of our educators.
Absolutely. But the base work, again, is just getting some of the technology in place to be able to do that. Because right now, we're just not really equipped to do, here. We need to make technology improvements before we start getting into that room. But I understand that room is here to stay.
And for clarification, are you asking, can we build a curriculum that would teach students the skills so as they leave us? I think that is definitely a possibility. I think as I'm thinking about this, that really falls into the career connection piece that our real world learning facilitator will be working on over the next few years. I don't know that it would be necessary for us to use any funds to do that. I think that's something that we could do just within our internal operations.
Okay.
But I hadn't really thought about that, and that is a very interesting idea.
Because then how does that impact the IT master plan in terms of all educational spaces being able to convert quickly to where it's an online forum and you have that capability throughout your infrastructure instead of just limited to a boardroom? What's that master plan? Because I don't see this, the change in the modality and the environments from what I'm seeing in my industry, it's not going away. The reality is you can start to reduce overhead costs and all that thing in business perspective, which is saving us money and allowing us to work effectively through an online modality. What's that? How's that impact your IT master plan?
So recently, the federal government released funds for ECF, Emergency Connectivity Fund, that Mr. Walls is working with to try to procure as much as we can for what we're trying to do. Our motto in our tech department is we want to do everything we can to support our curriculum. We don't to just try to build this IT robust, juggernaut, and then curriculum has to work around us. And so we're always working with the curriculum to see what we can do to supplement, to be synergistic and do those things. And so our plan really revolves around what we're trying to do from a curriculum perspective. And so everything you're talking about there, those are skill sets the kids need, then we're going to do everything we can around that. But the more funding we can get, right now we're one-to-one take home 6th grade through 12. And we're not quite there yet with K through 5, although we're one-to-one in-house. We can then push that down and make it one-to-one all the way take home. So we do have things like you're talking about, our new world, our new environment, and kids are learning remotely, distance learning, all those different things. They have the tools and capability to do that.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's a unique opportunity to, from your perspective, enrich kind of the master planning efforts and on infrastructure. I realize the time parameters are probably close, but I don't see the work environment ever going back. I think there's flexibility there that will probably be here to stay. My opinion, though. Unique opportunity. It's exciting. Thank you, Wayne.
So we're going to submit that draft plan, but there's, we can't encumber any expenditures, really can't move forward until we get the DSC to sign off on that and have it. Part of the plus of the plan, so it's a little while before we. Any other questions or comments on the relief funds?
Any other comments or questions on the topic of the relief funds? Okay, moving on, 11.4, preliminary assessed valuation, the tax rate.
Excuse me. In your board packet, I've included a document that has the updated assessed valuations for Clay, Platte, and Clinton County. Overall, combined total, there was about a 13.47, almost 13.5% increase. Those numbers are still going through the Board of Equalization process. In other words, people have appealed their assessed value and they're working through those. So I don't have final numbers yet. We anticipate getting some final numbers here very soon. But based on the preliminary data, again, a pretty significant increase. Quite frankly, one of the biggest increases we've seen in several years in the district, like prior to when things were really growing back in 05, 06, 07. and then everything fell out in 08. Well, these are kind of, stuff from 13, 15 years ago, kind of growth rates. So it's really outstanding as far as the progress in Clay County. I'm not sure if you saw recently, based on the census data, but in the metropolitan area, the Platte County was the fastest growing county over the last 10 years in the metropolitan area, and Clay County was number 2. That's more than Johnson County, that's more than Wyandotte County, that's more than Jackson County. So it's growing. The Northland is growing, and again, not just growing, but growing in value significantly. As a result of that, again, you will have a recommendation at your September 15th meeting for a tax rate hearing to establish the tax rate. That'll be an open public meeting, and there will be discussion, but ultimately there are some rules in place based on that significant growth. You will be required to roll your tax rate back. It's currently, your total tax rate is $5.10. I believe when we get all the final numbers in, it will go down about a quarter. We will need to roll our tax rate down about a quarter based on the Hancock Amendment, because local taxing entities cannot get a big windfall based on increases in assessed value. It's a taxpayer protection law. And as a result of that, again, you will be required to roll your tax rate back. Again, I anticipate about a quarter. We'll have those final numbers for you soon, but it's good news. It's good news. It also helps the district's master building program, because again, you are able to borrow up to 15% of the district's assessed value. Our assessed value went up almost $39 million this past year. So again, that increases the district's bonding capacity. So it's a good thing. So I'll answer any questions that you have about that. As anticipated, if you recall at the May workshop, we estimated about $600,000 of new money based on increases in assessed value. We said overall was going to be about a 3% increase. Remember that? Well, based on my calculations, we're going to get about $615,000 of additional revenue. So that 3% CPI was 1.4, but with new construction and et cetera, that's what it's going to work out to be. So I'm pretty pleased with that. So.
Any comments or questions on the assessed valuation? And we'll take a look at this again next month when we set our tax rate. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to 11.5, COVID leave resolution.
Yeah, Mrs. Davis covered this last week at your meeting. What you have before you is a resolution, because legal has advised us this is the cleanest way to suspend your policy. What it boils down to is last year we had a very broad sweeping policy because we had enough employees. There was a federal allowance for again this broad application of COVID leave, and so many districts around us are not going to have any COVID leave for this school year. They're going to just use their regular leave policies. And there are other districts, however, around us that are allowing up to 10 days of COVID leave. That is the biggest number I've heard from districts around us, up to 10 days of COVID leave. That's to date. Districts are still working on these policies and discussing that. So we felt like we wanted for our staff to fall somewhere in the middle. We certainly understood the need to well, we just can't sustain that broad sweeping policy we had of COVID leave. At the same time, we didn't want to completely pull the plug on our staff. So we felt like this resolution providing for 5 days of leave and making it applicable to for children and spouses was kind of a compromise, if you will. So again, that's why you have it in the form of a resolution. Legal advises that's the best way to suspend your policy.
I had the opportunity to speak with a teacher today, and she had some concerns on the length of the COVID leave, and she offered me an alternative and a suggestion, and I told her I would talk about it because I thought there was merit to it. And then I'm sorry, Sean, I asked her to coordinate with you directly and validate that through kind of the benefits committee. But essentially, Todd, she brought up a pool structure, realizing that you have 5 days that you have allocated to each individual, with the reality is not each individual is going to use their COVID leave throughout a year. Could there not be a pool structure behind that in terms of, for those? So I hate to tell people if something severe and adverse truly impacts them, COVID related, that we can't do something to help them. And I know there's other things like FMLA and those type of alternatives, but if we're going to go off the cuff and say we're allocating 5 days regardless to individuals that end up getting COVID or need the COVID assistance, would it hurt us to allocate a pool structure to support that? And is there merit? So I guess I would make that recommendation. I would ask that, and I know it's critical that we kind of have a resolution now, but I would ask that that's explored and brought back to the September meeting. If there's any merit there, great. If not, I understand.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that question. We do have a policy in place that is a safety net, if you will. It's a sick leave bank. We used to have a sick leave pool. Legally, we were advised to get rid of that policy because it was in direct conflict with FMLA leaves. And so we have eliminated pool type structures based on our legal advice. But in place of it, we put in a very generous sick leave bank policy. Mrs. So you, I was going to say Mrs. Davis, so you are, remind me again, that policy, the sick leave bank?
For the sick leave bank?
Yeah.
So if an individual would qualify under eligibility rules of FMLA, then they would have access to the sick leave bank. And so with the sick leave bank, you have to use 3 dock days first, and then you're able to borrow up to 60 days from the bank. Then you pay those back to the district 5 days per year minimum. You can pay back more than that if you wanted to. So we do have that safety net for the bank. As far as regular accrued leave, again, as Dr. Schutz spoke to, legal counsel has advised us not to allow people to give one another their leave. We've had requests from friends who work together, married couples in the district, and we've taken that to legal, and the answer has always been that is not sound legal advice to be able to allow someone to give someone else their leave. You get into a lot of other issues that I don't think would be a good idea to go down.
Yeah, so I guess I was thinking about it not as individual leave, but it's a pool leave, not associated to anyone, but it's accrued against as needed. And then if
that's what's advised against by legal. That pool concept is not advisable. But I will remind the board that we consulted with teacher leadership, on this policy. And those that we spoke with were very thankful that our recommendation would be to allow for some COVID leave. In that districts around us, many of them are, that's why we give you sick leave. You utilize your sick leave, and that be the case. So it's not like we made this recommendation in isolation. Matter of fact, our first version was that the first 3 days would be docked, and then you'd get 5 leave days, and it was not applicable to staff or children. And then after consulting with staff, with teacher leadership, we wanted to provide a little greater benefit.
Is that the building leadership team?
No, these are teachers that are leaders in the district that we have visited with on this topic.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a special committee to that conversation, or I didn't know how that process worked.
We did not have any organized a specific process, but again, I just want you to know that we did not do this on our own.
No, I don't doubt that.
And we did also visit with administration as well. So.
And Ian, this is a resolution, so it can be revisited at any time. So if there was a greater need, or the federal government came out, the state government, with additional leave policies that would be applicable to COVID leave that we would need to follow, we can terminate, edit, or add to this resolution at any time.
Yeah,
So
I would think so. In my ignorance and not knowing the full spectrum of it, I would ask that if our educators out there are concerns, that they just work through the appropriate teams that they have access to, and that you guys be open to those conversations going forward. So if there's opportunity for improvement to that we take that opportunity to explore it with them. And I'm okay with that.
You bet. And we meet monthly with representatives from NEA, MNEA, our local group. And, you know, they are a great voice for our staff. And we have a salary and benefits committee, of course, as well. It's very, very active. So there are avenues in place. And of course, my extension is 7609, and my email certainly published as well. So.
Because I don't know if it's the sentiment of one individual or a couple. I have no idea.
Absolutely. Understood.
Just thought I'd bring it up if there's opportunity there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the COVID leave resolution as presented in our packet? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the COVID leave resolution as presented in our packet.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the COVID leave resolution as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.6 supplemental pay schedule update.
You have the update there, and there's a new position on there. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Davis, and she can elaborate on that.
okay, so in June, when you approved the salary schedules for the 21-22 school year, this was part of that approval process. However, since that time, we've had the conversation with needing to add the concessions manager position, since the junior class is no longer going to take on that role. And then we also needed a provision to be able to pay workers to work that concession stand if we didn't have volunteers from the different student groups. So we needed to add this to our supplemental pay schedule. The concessions manager is that position that it says annual stipend at $10,000. And then the worker is $14 per hour. And so we just need your approval to be able to add this to our pay schedule.
Comments or questions about revising the supplemental pay schedule to incorporate into our.
I know we talked about the manager. I don't recall talking about the worker. I think that presents a whole nother issue. If they're going to be $14 an hour, if they're a current employee, if they're not a current employee, now you're bringing them on as W-2. There's more
Equity issues.
What's that?
Equity issues.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things there from an administration standpoint. At some point in time, well, let's go back one step. We said that we were hoping that the managers would be paid for out of the profits of the or the proceeds of the concessions. We weren't 100% sure it would cover it all. If we're not sure it's going to cover the managers, then the $14 an hour is off our bottom line. At some point in time, if students don't want the concessions, when do we contract this out to an outside service or just not have them? I think the cost associated with that $14 and the whole administration behind that is going to get out of hand quick. I'm not in favor of paying $14 an hour for somebody to work a concession stand. At that point in time, let's find a vendor and contract it all out.
Yeah, I think that's, a vendor is an interesting concept. I'm not aware, Mr. Hedgecourt, of districts around us that, I think there are, though, districts that contract that service.
Again, our presentation was modeled off a lot of local districts. And so we don't think we're going to have to use the student worker very often. That's really just a backup because we're going to have a bunch of different times where we'll have available time slots for community members to work. And so there might be a wrestling match where we're wrestling, for example, Grandview, who may not have a lot of wrestlers, and they know that that's not going to be a very high profitable event. And so we won't have anybody sign up. So we still need to cover that concession stand during that time. So we utilize the student worker in that time to just cover that hour and a half, 2 hours to still have the service of a concession stand, but nobody from the community or booster club signed up to work it. That's really what that student worker is meant for.
I guess that's a good point. Are we mandated to have concession stands?
We're not mandated to have the concession stand.
Maintain.
We do it as a service. And so, you know, every Friday night, in the fall, we have a concession stand down there for them, for the football team. And so we want to make sure that we have those same opportunities for all of our sports. And so we want to offer any booster club to work those sports. We might have some sports where no one offers to work it. So do we just not have a concession stand and that sport suffers? And so our idea was to make sure that at all events that we host at home, we would have a viable concession stand for patrons to come and grab a drink, have a meal, and enjoy and watch their student perform.
Would there be a threshold of an activity where, due to the volume and its nature is so low, it does not make sense to operate a concession stand?
There is very much some items that we could operate where
So
we
maybe we could work
do
on,
come in the red.
maybe
You
we
are
could
correct.
work on establishing a threshold.
Then again, we would have some events that we just don't have some covered. And we'd be telling that sport and that activity, we're sorry, we're not going to cover your event. You don't make enough profit for us. And so I'm the messenger here. I did not put this plan together. I can get more questions from Darren Schaefer if you'd like.
So does the sport activity make money off the concession stand?
No,
So really, it's just,
They do not.
it's just the opportunity to have refreshments for the people observing that sport.
correct. We're providing a service.
Would we ever concede to allowing people to bring in their own refreshments if they didn't meet that threshold?
You know, just like if you go to Royals game, they allow you to bring in water and things like that. You know, we don't actively try to turn people away. You know, there's wrestling terms where people bring in their own coolers. You know, we just ask that they keep it, you know, in the cafeteria for their student use. So we don't actively turn people away that bring their own food in.
So to your point, Scott, I think you're spot on, but I do think we have an opportunity to do it for a year and see what its overall impact is. Because I doubt it's devastating, but I, to your point, if it's not putting us in a position, if it's putting us in a position where it's constantly affecting our bottom line to serve 10 people, well, yeah, it doesn't make sense, and maybe it can be refined. Because I do know, you know, flag football, we got an email, our youth football program got an email yesterday that if we didn't volunteer for certain activities, that they were going to pull our $100 deduction. So they are working to make sure people are going to sign up for events, including concession stands supporting our activities as well.
We can go a different model. We can put out an RFP to have a vendor come in and handle all our concessions. However, that's going to take away all the opportunities
For
our
those
booster clubs.
boosters and those clubs.
Exactly. So what are we here for? We're here for kids. And so that's why we chose this model. And so, yes, we are going to be in the red on some events. There's no doubt about it. But of course, you know, football being how much in the black they are is going to help cover all those other events, just like when you see college athletics, how much they bring in, they help fund all the other athletics in the college. And so that is just how it works. That's not me treating that is just the financial piece
Sure, yeah.
of the
No,
concession.
it makes sense allowing the opportunity for clubs to generate revenue, but then you could argue if clubs are not interested in that opportunity to generate that revenue, do we still have a concession stand?
I personally feel like more than 75% of the events, we will have a booster club want to, you know, work that event and profit share with us. There will be some events that just aren't profitable enough, or it's on a weird date or something like that, that they won't want to volunteer for. We'll have to hire a student worker. And these are going to be for 2.5 hours at $14. You're talking $28, you know, $35 paid out during each time to have a student worker work it.
Okay. Thank you, Robert.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Okay, you said we're going to profit share in some of these lesser events. We would take the money from some of the football and move it over here to whatever event we don't have very much participation. Is that correct? And if so, that means the booster club or the boosters that are doing the football event are going to have to give up some of that cash for an event later in the season.
What I mean by profit shares, for example, we might clear $3,000 revenue on any Friday night for the football game. That booster club will have a negotiated rate, whether it's a percent or a flat rate that they would get for working it. So let's say it's $1,500. So that way they'll get $1,500 for working it. We will get the other $1,500 minus whatever the food is for that profit. So we're going to see the most net profit from the football. So the other events, they will get a lesser amount based on the percent or the flat rate that is negotiated for that event. And so, of course, the smaller the crowd, the less people that booster club would have to attend to. For a football game, you're going to have possibly 6 to 8 people to help work it. So you're going to get a bigger amount. In a wrestling meet, you might only have 2 people have to work it. So that negotiated rate is going to be, lower. And so, but when you look at it as a whole, the football games are if past history is any indication, the football games bring in the most revenue. They would bring in the most net profit for that if in case we had a sport where we didn't quite have the net profit to help cover that.
Then are all the student workers, do they need to have a food handler's license?
Absolutely. So they would all have to have their food handled unless we have those smaller events be prepackaged for everything. So prepackaged chips, prepackaged nachos, prepackaged cola. In that case, they would not have to have their food handler's permit. Now don't quote me 100% on that. Wayne, is that correct? Okay. Wayne's giving me a thumbs up. So as long as it's prepackaged, they don't have to have it, but in other cases they would. So in those cases, we would move towards having prepackaged items for those smaller events, just in case we have to have a student worker.
And we then put every one of those student workers on a W-2.
They would have to have W-2, correct? So it's going to be a lot of learning. It's the first year we've worked this system. Darren Schaefer spent a lot of time contacting districts, seeing how they did it, what worked for them. What we do know is if we don't do something, we won't have concessions at all. And so we believe we have a model that works for us based on the districts around us and their past mistakes, their past successes. And so in year 1, we will do a plan, do, study, act. We planned it out. Now we're going to do it. We're going to study the results of that. We're going to act on that. And in year 2, we're going to be better. So that's what we're looking to do with our booster plan this year. And then more financials to give exactly what's going on. And we might decide, okay, we need to tweak what we're paying out to booster clubs. We tweak how many times we're using student workers, or it might have to be a hard decision to not have a concession in a sport. But, we do want to try to give all sports an opportunity to have a concessions, to have that same environment and opportunity for parents, grandparents to visit that game and have that availability.
Yeah, so I'm not in favor of it. I know 50 years ago, 30 years ago when I was in school, you were working. So there's going to be the next concessions are me. I think down the road paying just more than $14 an hour.
Any more comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the supplemental pay schedule update as presented in our packet. Got a motion and a second to approve the changes to the supplemental pay schedule as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.7, new position job descriptions.
Along those lines, you have a couple of job descriptions that we need approved. These are new positions. Concessions manager, we just had that discussion. Also preschool educator. This is a little bit of a unique teaching position, and we don't have a job description that directly addresses that. And so we would like your approval on that as well. Yeah.
Preschool.
Yeah.
So we have a full-time educator and we have a part-time educator. Our full-time educator is Heidi Eptigrove and our part-time educator is Amanda Monk.
So I've had the opportunity to know Heidi for quite a while as she's helped raise my kiddos in daycare, and I am absolutely excited that we have her part of our program.
So are we.
She is phenomenal. So congratulations. It's a great hire.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions on the two new job descriptions for the new positions? And this is just approving the job.
Okay, if no other questions, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the job descriptions for the new positions as presented in our packet. Got a motion in a second to approve the job descriptions for the new positions as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.8 personnel report.
Yeah, you have personnel report in there, and we've discussed this report, and we request your approval.
Any questions or comments? We reviewed the personnel report in executive session. I don't think we'll have any. If not, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the personnel report as presented in our packet. Got a motion and a second to approve the personnel report as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.9 renewal of CBIZ as the district's benefits consultant.
Now, we've tried to keep the board up to speed on this conversation. If you were at the convocation today, you heard me visit with the entire staff about this. We had poor performance in our self-insurance pool this past school year, in the year previous to that. So we want to do our due diligence, and we want to study the self-insurance concept along with the fully insured concept. In order to study the fully insured concept, we need a broker to help us through that process. And if we were to, at the end of this process, and you have the timeline there in your packet as well, want to go with the fully insured process, which is what we did 11 years ago, 12 years ago, we need a broker in our pocket ready to roll to go with that process. We would need to let the self-insurance pool well in advance that we were exiting the pool, and we need a broker in our pocket to get rolling on working with providers, insurance providers, so that we could not miss a beat in providing our staff with the board paid insurance.
Does that process happen in that order? Yes, again, or do you do exploratory with the broker and then determine if
We have a process outlined. We will identify a cross-section of staff members. And actually, I've invited Sarah to participate with her background in insurance to represent the board in this process, to study those two models, our performance in the self-insurance model and how it works, as well as the fully insured model. And then they'll, after studying that, we'll have a recommendation as to how to proceed or whether we go fully insured or self-insured. So we won't have to put an RFP out then if we want to go fully insured. We've already done that, and we have the broker ready to roll. Does that make sense? Anything to add, Mrs. Davis?
No.
Nope.
So if you look at that timeline, our next objective, if you approve CBIZ as our consultant, then would be to get that committee together and to get that process rolling.
We did work with CBIZ prior to going to the self-insured model. So we have a relationship with them. And even when we went to fully insured, they did what, Wayne, they did our dental,
Our life,
and
our vision and our life insurance.
yeah.
Mhm.
Great service. Many people are familiar with their services. They do a great job.
So, sorry, let me make sure. Based on, I'm assuming they make their money based on the agreement which is established through the insurance pool, correct? Are there any stipulations that would require us to go out for bid for those contractual services based on the dollar value or threshold that we would utilize?
I'm going to let Mr. Kruger answer that question.
So you are correct. We have a commission-based entity working on our behalf, and then the selected vendors then pay them commission. We don't pay them anything to be our broker. However, through this process, if they go out and market our plan and our products for us, and we still elect not to go to the full insured model, they are requesting a $2,500 payment for those services. So, which is very reasonable for the amount of work that's done. If we do select the fully insured model, again, there will be no charge.
And I think the other part of your question, part of the timeline here is the broker release the insurance RFP. So they will send it out as an RFP on our behalf to collect Blue Cross.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be marketed, the Coventry and the Uniteds and the Blue Crosses and the Cignas, and there'll be an RFP put out and it'll go out to market to all those folks.
Yeah, I guess I was just asking, if they stand to make blank amount of money, would they exceed the consulting or the CBIZ? Would they exceed the threshold that requires to go out and bid those services? Like my procurement guidelines at where I work, if the potential vendor that I'm going to procure spends over 100,000, I'm required by state statute to go out and select 3 different bid models.
Yeah, again, the only thing that the Smithville School District will pay these folks is $2,500 if we don't select them. At the end,
indirectly, they're getting
self-insured.
Yeah, indirectly, their revenue comes elsewhere.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions about the renewal of district's benefits consultant? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the renewal of CBIZ as the district's benefits consultant.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the renewal of CBIZ as the district's benefits consultant. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 12.1 miscellaneous.
Yeah, we had convocation today. 4 of you were able to attend. Jeff was able to serve lunch before convocation, and then he had to get back to work. Thanks to all of you who were able to participate or be a part of today. It was a very nice convocation. It just went very well, and our staff is in a very good place, very excited to start the school year. We had our benefits fair going along at the same time as lunch, so it all went very well today. I mentioned here in my comments that the teacher meetings last through the 23rd. Actually, it's through the 20th, so through Friday. Teacher meetings last. Monday is a flex work day, so you can work that day or the day after the last day of school is kind of how that works. Number 2 is just a reminder, MSBA conference, the 4th through the 7th. Once we know what the schedule is and which board members are available on what days, and I thought we might work through some carpooling type scenarios. Number 3, new teacher reception. You typically do this at your September board meeting. I think last year or the year before, maybe you started the trend of doing it on a different night, just so you're not rushed into a board meeting. I thought that went well. I got the sense that you agreed. So I would suggest that since you're getting together with our legal counsel on September 28th, that you have your new teacher reception prior to that meeting. And I know that for those of you that have to travel from work and work a little later in the day, that may really put hurt on you. But I've visited with Dwayne Martin. We can push him back to 6:30, ask him not to come till 6:30. If we could start at 5, that gets you an hour and a half with our new staff. Dr. Craddifold, how many new staff members do we have?
We have 27.
27. I think an hour and a half would be enough time for you to meet them and have a little bit of time to visit with some that you may know or want to get to know. And then we could start our workshop at 6:30 if you like. That would be my suggestion. Obviously, it's your call.
Works for me. Will you guys send that correspondence as MSBA gets closer and kind of get?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll stay in touch. Just want to keep that on your radar. That'll be in November. So, yep, you bet.
Okay, if there's nothing else in the miscellaneous, the next item, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
That's several motions and several seconds to adjourn our meeting. Please vote. We are adjourned.
Yeah, no, you did.